The protagonist led a man into the hotel room. Clearly, he felt unwell, likely even in need of medical attention. But the fair-haired T.O.Yon refused to accept the help of medics. This irritated Chagun as he tried his best to make the injured man feel better. The young man wanted to bring the man some water and then leave the room. However, the latter suddenly behaved strangely, grabbed the protagonist by the arm and pulled him closer, probably due to the effect of a substance which was added to T.O.'s drink. He couldn't calm down and committed indecent acts. The man believed that although Chagun decided to help him, in reality he had a secret agenda, for which he did this for a stranger. A few hours ago, they were both at a party. The protagonist was obviously not happy to be there. The young man wanted to get home as soon as possible. Usually, at this time, he would go to bed. But now his phone was receiving numerous messages, reminding him that he needed to continue monitoring the target. In response, he sent a bold photo to his boss, because despite the excellent work of the subordinate, the latter remained dissatisfied. The room was filled with many young wealthy individuals not easily encountered. Among them was a girl named Crystal, a fearless celebrity among the youth. The girl had a wealthy patron, Dominic, who was the protagonist's target. Jay, his boss, wanted to obtain a priceless red diamond. Previously, the subordinate did not try to understand Jay's motives. However, this time his actions were chaotic and dangerous. Suddenly, a few guys passed by the protagonist. They accidentally pushed him, and the young man spilled his drink on his face. Although they apologized, they were discussing something bad. The scoundrels planned to intoxicate a person to tarnish his reputation. It turned out that their target was T.O. This was surprising and reckless, considering the influence of his family. Initially, Chagun did not want to interfere as he had a different task that evening. However, he continued to observe not his target, but the misdeeds of the scoundrels. Suddenly, when the man drank the offered alcohol, he looked directly towards the protagonist and clearly noticed that he was being watched. The onlookers suddenly realized that the wealthy man was feeling unwell and feigned concern for his health, even planning to help him leave the party. At that moment, Chagun could not hold back and rose from his secluded spot to approach the insolent individuals and their victim. Clearly, none of them expected an outsider to interfere in their plan. The young man then pushed one of the wealthy men, further shocking the others, after which he openly declared that he understood their scheme and intended to take T.O. away as he knew him and wanted to help. In reality, he already regretted his actions as he had missed his target in an attempt to help a stranger and also brought trouble upon himself. One of the wealthy men was too angry and even tried to attack Chagun. However, as it turned out, the protagonist was skilled in fighting and repelled the attacks. So, in a matter of minutes, the insolent man realized that he could not win. Meanwhile, T.O. watched the unfolding events with surprise, as he did not expect someone to defend him so selflessly. When all the criminals lay on the floor, unable to stand, Chagun approached their victim and helped the unfortunate man to the exit. At first, he wanted to take the well-known figure to the hospital. However, the latter refused, proving that for some reason it was not possible to do so. Instead, he asked to be taken to a hotel, where they would provide a room key without payment, considering that T.O. himself would arrive. The man who fell victim to the wealthy at the party was the younger son of one of the most influential families, but he did not compete for power with his elders. Instead, he only partially assisted the family business, managing a small part of it while leading an active life, becoming a well-known figure in the media space. He gained significant popularity when he achieved a notable victory in racing, astonishing everyone, but he did not continue to develop this career. The protagonist knew little about this person, only what is known to everyone, as they had hardly communicated before. However, now the situation was taking an increasingly strange turn as the man's actions, though explainable by the reaction to the substance he was drugged with, left the young man unsure how to respond. When he brought Tio to the hotel, he hoped to leave him there and depart immediately. But now it was uncertain how the evening would end for him. Cha-gun was also quite surprised that such a famous person knew his name and reminded him that this was their first meeting, so he should behave more politely. Only, due to the substance the wealthy man had taken, he was indifferent to rules and norms, wanting only to get what he desired. Of course, the protagonist could resist, but that evening he had drunk too much alcohol and was also not in a normal state. Therefore, all he could do was not resist too actively, pretending to be very angry at Tio. The latter continued to do what he wanted, disregarding the young man's attempts to resist, and soon things went too far. In the morning, Cha-gun woke up first and sat in a chair, smoking a cigarette, trying to comprehend what exactly had happened to him the night before. The young man had been attending events for the wealthy for several years, carrying out tasks given by Jay, and had always conducted himself well. Therefore, he could not even imagine that something like this would happen one day and the situation would become so indecent, especially since the protagonist simply wanted to help. Considering the man's popularity and how often he attends such parties, there is a chance that he will simply forget what happened over time. Now, the previous night's victim was sleeping peacefully, and observing this, Cha-gun noticed that even now he looked quite aesthetic. It was unusual that such an influential person as Tio knew the young man's name, and it might be better to tell Jay about this, but it was unclear how he would react to such news. Nevertheless, right now, the young man was not ready to discuss all this with his boss, as he had not fully recovered himself. And most importantly, he needed to explain himself to the wealthy man when he woke up, although Cha-gun did not plan to stay in this city for long and hoped never to meet him again. Soon, Tio was already preparing himself coffee, though he still looked very tired after the incident. In fact, the protagonist woke him up, as he could no longer stay in the hotel room, although the man took a long time to wake up. Now, they could finally discuss everything that happened to never worry again about the consequences of the night spent together. The young man made it clear that he was not very concerned about this conversation, so he even wanted to leave without explaining anything, but decided to act more politely. It turned out that even for T.O., such behavior from his rescuer was unexpected, as usually such matters are not discussed. Now, the fair-haired man appeared much calmer than before, and even seemed somewhat haughty. Unexpectedly, he suddenly declared that the protagonist was not much different from those who had slipped strange substances into his drink yesterday, which greatly shocked the young man. He was convinced that Cha-gun would demand something from the person he helped out of trouble at the party, without intending to listen to his explanations. To avoid prolonging the conversation, Tio suggested that the rescuer openly state all his conditions. The young man was angry, as he had not thought of any benefit for himself. Even the incident in the hotel room was initiated by the wealthy man. Cha-gun would never have done such a thing himself. Surprisingly, for the man, such behavior was normal. He called it full-fledged help provided by his new acquaintance. The fair-haired also explained why he could not seek medical attention, as if forbidden substances were found in his blood, his entire family's reputation would be at risk. T.O. also asked the young man to leave his contact information, obviously intending to contact him again for some reason. Communicating with the wealthy man increasingly irritated the protagonist, so he hurried to end the conversation and simply leave, but still placed his business card on the table. He intended to forget about the previous night, meaning he also did not plan to disclose information about the well-known figure. Having stated this, the protagonist left the hotel room, leaving the fair-haired alone. He examined the business card on the table, immersed in his own thoughts, apparently still not believing in the selflessness of his rescuer. In the corridor, Cha-gun unexpectedly encountered a strange girl and her bodyguard, barely avoiding creating a problematic situation. The employee protected his boss from possible injury due to the protagonist's inattention, and he hurried to apologize. It turned out that these two were heading to T.O.'s room. The girl was quite displeased with his behavior in the family-owned hotel. Sona was the hotel director, and obviously a relative of the man. She was worried about how his actions could affect the reputation of the entire business. Moreover, she reproached the wealthy man for smoking in the hotel room, although he had never done anything like that before, and now insisted he was not guilty. It turned out that T.O. had not contacted the girl and invited her to meet in person for no reason. He wanted to discuss the incident at the party. The scoundrels who decided to intoxicate the wealthy man were involved in a business where Sona's hotel used to be a part but had long since left. This information shocked the girl so much that she decided to smoke herself, even though she had just scolded the man for it. She decided to handle everything related to these people herself and advised T.O. to go to the hospital immediately. He was planning to do so anyway, but was a bit upset that for the second day in a row everyone was advising him to go there. Of course, the relatives discussed family matters a bit. Sona mentioned her sister's desire to schedule a meeting with them, and T.O. inquired about his mother's well-being. The news was not entirely comforting, but either way, it was best to ensure the man's safety and medical assistance now. Meanwhile, the protagonist arrived at Jay's place, whom he didn't really want to see after everything that happened at the party. The boss was also angry at the subordinate for being late, as he should have reported the results of his surveillance long ago. The young man didn't tell Jay what really happened to him, so he simply attributed the delay to resting after working late the previous evening. There should be no problems on the next assignment, as Cha-gun was always cautious, not drawing unnecessary attention to himself. The protagonist briefly reported on Crystal's behavior, in which he noticed nothing strange, and asked Jay about the surveillance of Dominic. The man had done nothing suspicious, but the boss had gained access to the security system in his house, meaning they could steal the stone. The young man was worried that the two of them would not be able to handle it, which angered Jay even more. For Cha-gun, the assignment was the last one, and mistakes were not an option. The protagonist understood what awaited him in case of a mistake, so there was no need for reminders. In fact, he already regretted helping the criminal. Even if refusing would have meant death, he should not have agreed. Now, the outcome of their plan would mainly be the result of the young man's actions, and he would bear the responsibility in case of failure. Preparing to go on the assignment, Cha-gun once again realized the responsibility for what was happening and was very worried. Once in a dangerous situation, he saw the bandits' offer of cooperation as a chance for salvation without even considering all the risks. At that time, a close person betrayed him, and he was offered illegal work, but in reality it was all a deception. Still, the young man now tried to focus on the upcoming task, not personal worries, especially since Jay advised him to be more attentive. There was only an hour left for preparation, and the boss threatened the employee again, making him even more anxious. The building they were to infiltrate had numerous security cameras, but now they were all turned off. Moreover, most of the guards had left with Dominic on important business, leaving only a few people there. The two adjacent buildings shared an electrical system, allowing the criminals to pretend to be workers coming to check it, thus entering one of them. The guards suspected nothing and easily let them through, allowing Jay to effortlessly cut off the power to all rooms and continue giving instructions to his subordinate. To reach the wealthy man's office, one must climb to the roof and descend to the adjacent building, which Cha-gun must do. The height was somewhat intimidating, but it was too late to stop, and he made the necessary jump using safety equipment. Next, he had to descend to Dominic's office windows, and the young man found himself inside just as the guard was distracted by a call to the boss to report the power outage. As soon as the conversation ended, the protagonist struck the man on the head, so he couldn't stop him or report to the owner of the premises. The young man simply tied up the guard, causing him no serious harm, and left him in the same place where they met. The criminal himself opened the door to the necessary room with a code lock and informed his boss. Jay did not openly express any assumptions, but he found it strange that such an expensive item as the red diamond was so poorly guarded. Then he speculated that the safe contained not only the stone, as Dominic was not smart enough to set up a trap there. The boss ordered his subordinate to take their target and flee the building, as there was no time to examine and marvel at everything around. However, remembering how skillfully the young man pretended to be an electrical worker communicating with the security at the entrance to the building, Jay realized that he was doing well. Previously, Cha-gun caused far more problems, as sometimes he nearly brought their plans to failure due to his condemnation of illegal methods of work. Now, he had become a very useful assistant, albeit still too willful, which sometimes greatly annoyed. Meanwhile, the young man reported that the safe contained several diamonds, suggesting that they might be fake. Jay was angry, but still ordered Cha-gun to take everything from the safe, not just the stones, and quickly leave. Inside, there was even a weapon, which initially surprised the young man, but then he realized that it made perfect sense considering whose office they were robbing. Unexpectedly, the leader realized that an unforeseen situation had arisen, which could jeopardize their safety. The owner's car returned too quickly. The meeting was supposed to take much longer. The protagonist hurriedly gathered items from the safe and then looked for escape routes to avoid encountering the building's owner. In the corridor, the boss's screams and accusations toward the tied-up guard were already audible, making escape quite difficult. Just as the young man was about to descend using the safety harness directly from the window, Dominic and his men burst into the room. He would have been caught if Cha-gun hadn't decided to throw the pistol he had taken from the safe at them. It hit the boss's head directly. At that moment, he realized he had created problems for himself, but it was too late to think about it. It was time to run. Later, the protagonist reminisced about everything that had happened and was upset by how many problems had arisen during this time. He was surprised himself that he managed to leave the building when the wealthy man and all his guards had already entered and the situation seemed hopeless. By throwing the pistol at the man's head, he managed to distract everyone present and escape through the window as planned. The young man vaguely remembered what happened next, only how he was riding in the car with Jay and was horrified by how his boss drove. After the incident, there was a great risk that Dominic's people would decide to pursue the criminal who dared to rob their boss. However, that was not the only problem. Cha-gun received a message from an unknown number. He suspected it might be T.O. Meanwhile, the criminal's assistant checked the stones for authenticity, and it turned out that all three were fake, albeit well made. The protagonist was shocked by such news, as he had taken great risks to obtain them, and it turned out to be in vain. At the same time, Jay reacted to this quite calmly, which was surprising, considering how much he wanted to acquire that stone. As the situation with the assignment became more and more complicated, Cha-gun had no time to deal with the anonymous message. The leader asked the one who discovered the fake to find out where exactly it was made, promising additional payment for this. After that, he, along with the protagonist, left the room to discuss their further actions. While the search for the diamond continues, the young man will have to hide, as he has already been seen by the wealthy man's guards and by the man himself. Unfortunately, he had nowhere to go, so the only possible option was to ask Jay to stay at his warehouse. A few days later, to make good use of his time in the deserted place, Cha-gun engaged in sports, perfecting his own body. Unexpectedly, his leader came to him, deciding to discuss T.O., as presumably the stone was now in his hands. Some time ago, it was decided to sell it, and the company owned by this man's family won the auction. Therefore, the next assignment was to get closer to him, which, of course, the protagonist was not at all pleased about. He even recalled that he should no longer work for Jay, as he had completed his last assignment, even though it did not bring the desired results. Still, it was precisely because of the leader's fault that everything happened this way, as he himself was finding out the whereabouts of the desired item. Jay found it suspicious that his subordinate wanted to leave just now when they had done a tremendous amount of work and were close to achieving their goal. Then he realized that Cha-gun was hiding something and demanded his phone to find out the truth about his motives. Of course, he did not want to share personal information, but it is impossible to hide anything from Jay, as he can still check the contents of the mobile device through his computer. Therefore, the young man was forced to show the message he had recently received from T.O., and the leader was pleased with what he saw. The man asked the protagonist for a meeting, and now this was an excellent opportunity to get closer to the owner of the stone and find more information. The young man regretted not deleting the message the moment he received it, leaving everything like that was too careless. Now, though he hoped he would no longer have to meet the wealthy man, he was still ready to agree to the meeting. When they finally met for dinner, Cha-gun tried to pretend he was happy about it, although in reality he was uncomfortable. It was hard to assume that T.O.'s family actually took the stone, as it would have been more logical to sell it illegally. The man informed that he wanted to atone for what happened last time and talk to his rescuer. He also gave the young man the key to the best room in the hotel and offered to stay there for any length of time. Out of politeness, the protagonist inquired about the health of his interlocutor, as he had previously been in a poor state, but now everything was already in order. Afterwards, it turned out that the wealthy man remembered their first meeting, which took place a month ago at an event. At that time, they stood together on a balcony, and a brief conversation took place between them, which didn't even have much significance. Their dinner conversation proceeded effortlessly. Such remarkable calmness surprised the young man. After dinner was concluded, the man decided to escort the protagonist to his room and tell him about all the privileges of staying there. It turned out that the young man was experiencing special treatment for the first time and was therefore very grateful to T.O. for it. The elevator arrived at the desired floor, and Cha-gun was about to exit when he suddenly stumbled and almost fell. The man decided to help him and held him by the waist to prevent him from falling to the floor, which made the situation somewhat awkward. Seeing that the protagonist had probably overindulged in alcohol, the wealthy man decided to escort him to his room. Although the young man tried to decline, unfortunately, the fair-haired man was too insistent and refused to give in. Last time, when Cha-gun brought the injured man after the party, everything around him was familiar. He also noticed that the man used a key card to open the door, which probably worked for all the rooms in the place. Inside, everything seemed incredibly beautiful, luxurious furniture, cozy atmosphere, and a whole 2 floors in the room. At first, he thought it might be the same place where they stayed last time, but quickly realized it was not. Seeing the guest's joy, the wealthy man thanked him for the day, and hearing a mutual response, was about to leave, allowing the young man to finally rest alone. Suddenly, the young man remembered that he had been invited to another meeting with T.O. and decided to give his consent to it at the end. Unexpectedly, during the handshake, the man suddenly pulled the interlocutor towards himself and announced that he would look forward to the opportunity to meet again. After such an embarrassing gesture, he simply politely bid farewell to the protagonist and finally left his room. When Cha-gun reported the incident to his leader, he was even pleased that things turned out this way, as now his subordinate would have more chances to gather information. Moreover, Jay was annoyed by the constant calls from the young man, so he ordered him to stop doing it and only contact him in case of extreme necessity. Finally, the young man could relax and rest a bit on the comfortable bed, as for some time he had been sleeping on the floor in the warehouse. Yet his thoughts returned to the wealthy man who had so generously thanked him for his help. Despite having many friends around him, the man had no romantic relationships. Cha-gun was confident that the fair-haired man was interested in him, as he presented himself as a confident and attractive individual. To maintain contact with him, the protagonist wrote several messages without much meaning but expressing care. Meanwhile, T.O. was on the phone with Sona discussing a meeting that was supposed to take place at the hotel but was cancelled. It was rescheduled for another date, and the man was ready to participate if he was warned in advance. The wealthy man hurried to end the conversation, as he wanted to ponder everything he had learned about Cha-gun, thanks to a personal investigation. This person turned out to be very secretive and did not even appear on social networks, and the company listed on his business card was merely a fake. He noticed the strange young man at parties he often attended, but never interacted with anyone, which was odd because usually people go there to make acquaintances. Sometime later, Cha-gun was drinking in a cozy place with a group of wealthy individuals, obviously all gathered to socialize with T.O. Everyone asked questions to the well-known person and offered various collaborations. In most cases, he did not refuse. The young man, unaccustomed to such close communication with the wealthy, felt uncomfortable, as he had mostly observed from the sidelines at parties. Seeing this, the fair-haired wanted to speak with his acquaintance to make him feel less anxious among strangers, but he was distracted. A talkative young man started talking about Crystal and Dominic, who had been robbed not long ago, a topic that the protagonist did not like at all. Everyone wondered why they did not report to the police and just sent their people to track down the criminal, as usual criminals do. No one wanted to have any connections with that family, as most were afraid of them and communicated only for that reason. Cha-gun could no longer listen to this conversation, as he was involved in the incident being discussed, so he hurried to the restroom. The talkative young man looked very strangely at the barely acquainted person, as if he was waiting for a moment when he would be unaccompanied. Alone at last, the young man could finally relax a bit. It was hard for him to stay composed in such a tense moment. A little more, and he would have revealed his anxieties. He could not have imagined that even in such circles, there would be rumors about those they had previously robbed, making the whole situation a surprise for him. Suddenly, that very suspicious person entered the same room, and the young man tried to leave immediately, but he was stopped. The stranger wanted to know how close his relationship was with T.O., as he had never brought complete outsiders before. Therefore, he assumed that these two were closer than it might seem, but of course the protagonist denied everything. Then the insolent man offered him close contact, promising that there would be no serious consequences from it. The criminal became angry at such disgraceful and even vile words, not understanding why he dared to say such a thing. Realizing that there was no one else in the restroom, Cha-gun thought he could hit the wealthy scoundrel, as without witnesses he could remain unpunished. In fact, he had already painfully twisted the enemy's arm, intending to fight back so that he would never dare to propose such a thing again. But unexpectedly, T.O. appeared nearby. He noticed that the protagonist had been gone for a long time, so he decided to look for him. The insolent man used this opportunity to break free from the criminal's grasp and leave while he still could. The wealthy man stopped his friend and declared that this time he could not act as he pleased, as the person he disrespected was important to T.O. Quickly realizing the situation, he hurried to leave to avoid further problems. The protagonist also wanted to return to the other guests, but the man stopped him, as the evening was obviously already ruined. Spending time in pleasant company did not work out, so he invited the young man to continue their conversation at T.O.'s house. Within a short time, the acquaintances were in the wealthy man's car. The protagonist himself did not understand how he agreed to this. The young man realized that this was a very convenient way to enter the home of his target, so he decided not to miss such an opportunity. It became obvious that the man was interested in him, which only made the task of getting closer to him easier. It was hard not to notice how deeply Cha-gun was thinking, so his companion tried to inquire about the young man's concerns. The criminal decided to make sure his suspicions were correct and turned out to be right. The influential person was interested in him. But in response, he received the same question, an attempt to find out whether he was interested in T.O. or if he only felt gratitude towards him. To avoid revealing his motives, the young man simply stated that anyone would be interested in such a popular and attractive person. After that, they no longer spoke, and the journey passed in complete silence, making it even more awkward. The protagonist realized that he was now thinking even more about the person beside him, although he had previously wanted to dismiss these thoughts. At the same time, he continued to look at him, observing the features of the wealthy man's appearance that made him quite attractive. But as soon as the man looked back at his companion, the young man pretended that he had been admiring the landscape outside the window all this time. Soon they arrived at their destination, and while waiting for the elevator, Cha-gun tried to understand if close contact was possible that evening and did not understand why he was thinking about it. The residence was certainly luxurious, but the young man did not have time to take it in, as the man immediately turned to him, first looked intently into his eyes, and then kissed his forehead. The gesture seemed quite harmless, but after that the wealthy man made it clear that he wanted more and eventually touched the acquaintance's lips with his own. Last time there was nothing like this between them, as everything happened under the influence of alcohol and substances taken by the fair-haired man. Now everything was completely different. This case could not be called unexpected, and it could not be said that the young man did not want it. After that, the man announced that he intended to atone for his past rudeness, and they moved on to something more than just touches. In the process, the wealthy man tried to learn more about his partner, but the latter promised that the conversation would take place after they were finished. Chapter 11. In the morning, the young man could finally examine the apartment. The view from the window was no worse than in the hotel where he had been living recently. Only such a rich and famous person as T.O. could live in such a place. Thinking of his partner, he looked at his contented face during sleep. If you remember the previous night, at times his behavior was annoying, but occasionally it seemed quite sweet. There were no cigarettes here, which the protagonist now found so necessary, as he was overcome by an unpleasant feeling of anxiety. Last time, everything that happened could be called a mistake, but now the man came of his own free will and did not resist at all. If Jay found out about what happened, he probably would not feel sorry for his subordinate. On the contrary, he would decide that such actions were necessary to achieve the goal. Meanwhile, the leader still had not contacted the criminal for several days. Usually after such a long period of silence, he would be angry about the lack of information. Still, now is not the time to worry about that. It's better to explore the home of the one who has become the new target of the criminal. Of course, it would be unwise to keep a diamond at home, but perhaps something interesting could be found there. The residence was quite large, but the rooms inside were small, though quite cozy. It was noticeable that the apartment's owner is often at home, despite constantly attending parties for the wealthy. Looking at one of the cabinets, the young man tried to understand what bothered him in this house, but could not realize what it was. However, he found a hiding place, which he had seen a lot of before, so he immediately opened the hidden cabinet, but there were only trophies. At that moment, the man appeared nearby and tried to find out what his guest was trying to find without permission, wandering around the house. Waking up, he did not see Cha-gun in bed and was upset, as he wanted to be near his partner, and then he also discovered that the young man had decided to search his house. The protagonist did not know how to justify himself and decided to lie that he was just looking at the interior of the entire house. Although the wealthy man was ready to give the criminal anything in that room, he was still surprised at how skillfully he found the hiding place. The young man apologized for his inappropriate behavior, and, when reminded of the promise he made at night to tell about himself, decided to do so. While the protagonist was taking a shower, the wealthy man prepared breakfast for them, although he did not look like he could cook well. T.O. answered all the minor questions about his life, but always lied to create a certain image for his partner. He was pleased that the man did not try to find out the motives for searching the house. Instead, he asked about something very simple. Nevertheless, he still did not understand what this strange person was thinking and why he was trying to get to know Cha-gun. Crystal and her friends were shopping for new clothes in a store and talking on the phone with her Uncle Dominic. They were obviously arguing, but nevertheless, the girl learned that the one who robbed the man was at a party with her not so long ago and also received his photo. Because of the fight that the protagonist caused, the well-known person remembered him and could now recognize him. Thank you for watching. If you want me to continue this story, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. See you very soon.